All right. Hey, everybody. So I'm supposed to introduce these guys. I think you guys all know all of them by now, but I will share one interesting tidbit. All four of them came from a different career before coming into animal welfare. So you don't have to do that, but you can.
That's awesome.
And actually, I'll say that I did too. I worked in software before coming into animal welfare.
There you go. 5 for 5.
Yep.
Sucks you in for life.
All right.
I
So
want to do a post on that.
post on that,
When
yeah.
we're done.
All right, cool. So we are here to talk about no-kill culture. So first of all, what is no-kill culture? How do you guys define it?
You're jumping in.
Go ahead.
For our organization, so just to give you history, I am, my last gig was the Lynchburg Humane Society, where I was an executive director for 9 years. And so we took that organization from 50% up to 94%. I think it's down to 91%, I have to be honest. But for me, in our culture, it was about problem solving. It was about taking euthanasia or killing out of the toolbox and coming up with other solutions to the problems that we were facing at that time, and creating a culture of creative innovation, and there was no wrong idea, and trying anything and everything we could not to have to euthanize animals.
Awesome. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 3 things to highlight some of what she said in kind of the various areas. The 3 things that I think cultures that have had in common, whether it was best friends or some of the places I worked before, positivity and celebration was one, because it's really hard work, so that was important. Urgency, and never forgetting what that mission, what your mission is, and what you're kind of, working towards, and change. Really getting comfortable with change.
Yes. I had something on that. For me, when I started, again, it was a second career for me. I did about almost 25 years in parks. So when I came to animal services, I didn't have a no-kill culture. That wasn't what I set out to do. What I set out to do is be the very best animal shelter that I could possibly be. And because I didn't have a background in animal welfare, I really didn't have any, like a suitcase of beliefs, and I'm not saying that all do, but I do bump into that a lot. Everybody has an opinion on something, and I was more of a blank slate. And so I believe a no-kill culture is a culture of excellence, and I believe, as does the majority of humans in the communities we serve, that killing pets unnecessarily is insane. And so I would argue that we don't have a no-kill culture. I think we just kind of reverse engineer everything we do, our plans, our culture, and it's about a culture of excellence and what does the community expect of us, and then we manage accordingly, right? Goals, objectives, everything supports that mission. And I think that's what we're trying to get to, that in this lifetime, that no kill's the norm, and it's popularized and socialized, and we're no longer talking about it like it's different.
Cool.
I just want to point out that all of them work for Best Friends. I'm just saying.
Now, but that's recent.
Only like 4 months.
So,
And Rebecca used to work for Best Friends, so.
I did. I'm the
So there.
I'm the prodigal son or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
that's
that.
right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So, yeah, not a whole lot to add. I mean, it is definitely about problem solving, but it's also it's always putting life saving first, and it's having faith that you can succeed. I think as a leader, the thing I can do best for the team is believe in them and show them that belief.
That's awesome.
Good answer.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. How do you onboard people who are new to the movement and your organization, and what steps do you take to ensure that they understand the mission and vision of No Kill?
Is it bad to say I talk to them until they start to cry?
That's funny.
Well, in Richmond days, Richmond and Lynchburg days, what we would do is spend a day. I would spend about a couple hours with all new staff members once a month and talk to them about my philosophy, the vision. We went through some of those key points like community cats, educated them on the the key topics within the field, pit bulls, open adoptions, the basics. But then, they got to know me as a person. I think it's important for leaders to be real people and not be seen as the scary person that sits in an office. So when we onboard people, we do it with a lot of personal contact, and then they spend about 2 to 3 days in the various departments in which they're learning the job from, and they do a lot of reading, and we have them watch videos on different topics, and so it's an ongoing process for us. I got to tell you, I don't think anyone truly understands the field until they've been with us for a little bit of time. But we've developed such a strong culture in Lynchburg, where I'm from, that everyone in the city knows who the organization is and understands what we are about. And, we set forth key core values when we moved into our new building. So we went from a really cruddy old building to a brand new building. And so we went from 18 staff members up to 50. So we had to really decide who we wanted to be as an organization and who we wanted to hire, because that's a lot of people under one roof at one time. And if they didn't all mix, they wouldn't communicate well and they wouldn't work well. So I can talk more about that later, but generally it's just we make sure they understand what the core values are, and we make sure they understand they get reviewed to them as well. So any behavior that steps out of line is usually not tolerated.
Thank you.
Yeah, and besides what's been said, I think the thing, and this probably isn't terribly surprising, but it's possible if you, so one of the places I worked in LA, No Kill is a very free and open dialogue. People don't really think about it being controversial, which is kind of strange because in most places of the country it is. So the only thing that I would add is and I learned this really from a woman named Bonnie Brown, but we really spent a tremendous amount of time explaining what no-kill was, because there's a lot of people that have various definitions or perceptions of what it is and what it isn't. So she really did a good job, and I've carried this on and learned from her, of just really, besides the things that you heard from McKenna and Rebecca talking to them until they cried, is also part of the talking till they cried was really kind of getting deep into what no-kill means, what it means for us, especially even in places like Philadelphia, where we were the animal control facility, and we did talk about animals that were killed versus euthanized, and that was a difficult conversation, but it was always an initial part of onboarding to really help them understand that this is how the public will help us.
I think people that were new to the movement were easier for me in the 2 municipal organizations that I worked at, because they just, again, they just were learning and excited to be there. And I think about all the personnel issues I had, people that were new to the field, just not so much. There was not so much sabotage or dissension or insubordination or confusion, or not as much coaching and conversations. But that's not to say when you come in organizations, the people that have been there for a while, they have value and they have experience. And so that coaching and training and all that's important. It's just I didn't need to do as much with the new folks. And new folks kind of are like, okay, cool. We're going to find live outcomes for the majority of the pets in this building. That makes total sense to me. And we're going to work at it. The thing I found the most is people didn't realize how hard the work was, how loud the kennels were, how stimulated you can get in that environment, and how focusing on not forgetting meds and not making, all the little details, that was the big thing. The big thing was not about saving lives, it was the work. Rebecca and I, we talked about this, was hard, and, keeping people from running and, quitting and saying, this is hard. It's hard on my ears, it's hard on my mind, something is hard on my heart, hard on my feet, hard on my brain. So it's hard work, and people don't realize that. They think it's gonna be fun. They're gonna pet dogs all day and walk, and it's loud. I was shocked when I started working in animal services how loud it was. So a lot of empathy.
Yeah, I think that for our organization, we run county shelters in the Atlanta area. It's definitely a work in progress. I know that we have a week-long orientation program that I see some of my team back there, and maybe they can help me out with this. It lasted a month, maybe, that we were able to actually implement it. Where we have several different facilities. So we have one that's not open admission, where we could use that as a way to get people on board. But the problem is, in the open admission facilities, we needed people so quickly that we had to onboard them really fast. Mm-hmm. And I think at the upper levels of the organization, at least in terms of pay scale, that people are very passionate, committed to no-kill. But we're relying on a lot of people that may not have the benefit of that experience, or even ever have the conversation with me, where they start to cry, that we're struggling with. We also have we're working in an almost full employment economy, so we have a lot of turnover. We have a very diverse workforce, unlike, I think, a lot of animal welfare organizations. Ours does reflect the community that we're in, and it's very much a work in progress on how we make sure that we care about people that we're depending on to save lives.
Thank you. What do you think is the biggest threat to building a no-kill culture in your shelter?
I would say first and foremost, it goes back to kind of what McKenna says with core values. You really have to have people that are tied to what you're trying to do and to the way that you're going to go about doing your work. So again, I'm going to mention my old boss, Bonnie, but she had me read this book, and it was about getting the right people on the bus. Mm-hmm. And that really, I think, is, people underestimate. Sure, you have people that are slow, or you have people that maybe don't catch on quickly. The apathy in a team, or the people that are fighting or arguing with you aren't usually that dangerous. They care, they're passionate, they're trying to work around things. What I find is the people that don't believe in what you're doing and they're apathetic about it, that's a really bad sign of somebody that can completely derail your program.
I think for us, I try to turn what could be the biggest threat into an opportunity for us. I really believe that our shelters are always full. They're always at capacity. They're always above capacity, frankly. And there's a panic that happens. Every summer I have to have the same conversation, and I remind them, we had to do this last year, because everyone's worn out. And that just tension to, we've got to do something to relieve mm-hmm. this condition, and there's euthanasia out there. Mm-hmm. That tension is what drives people to save more lives, but it's how we navigate that tension that really makes a difference, I think.
Powerful.
Yeah, that actually made me think of a story, because right before spring hits, every year I would bring the staff in, and we'd have, this is where we are so far this year in stats, and do the big rah-rah meeting. And every year I'd say, who's never been here for spring or summer? And the new bright-eyed kids would all raise their hands, and I'd have to, like what you said, I reminded them and told them what you would experience, and let them know that there were going to have times where they are overwhelmed and they're stressed and they don't think they can do it anymore. And what they need to do is start to make connections with your coworkers now. Mm-hmm. And I think so often some of the younger generations are, including now me, because I'm all about my phone, but I feel like sometimes we lose that personal connection. And so we started to encourage if you're feeling stressed, go and speak to someone about it. It doesn't have to be your supervisor. It can be a coworker, and just vent. I mean, venting is okay. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest threats to a no-kill culture that I've seen in many organizations is negativity. It's the one or two people that are frustrated, and then they spill that into more people, and then it becomes a huge negative cesspool of negative to their leaders, but negative to the community and to the public. And so as leaders, it's our job to try and keep everybody motivated and looking at the positive, not focusing on the negative, and that's something that we really worked hard in our organization. and to get rid of those people that are so negative. I mean, don't waste too much time on them.
There was one thing I was thinking about, because you don't talk about parks. I don't have my buddy Paula here to represent with me from El Paso, because we both kept a parks background. I left this park. I worked at this one ginormous park in Fairfax County for 12 years. And when I came there, they had prostitution, they had drug deals, they had some gang violence, tons of suicides, not tons of suicides. And it was
family
it was
park.
really no, and it was it's right in the center of Fairfax County. It was 500 acres, and so all this bad stuff was happening. It didn't produce any revenue, and I put a lot of energy into it and worked with the police department and got a neighborhood watch program started called Park Watch that we launched, and had citizens with radios and like first aid kits. That they weren't there to intervene, they were there to report if they saw something. They would make a phone call. If it was for the police, if it was illegal, if it was just like, they would call one of us and we'd come. It was a big park, a big lake in the middle of it. And we cleaned it up and we programmed the crap out of it. We went from making no money to making, like $300,000, which doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot when you don't have a building. When you're doing putt-putt golf and boat rentals and little summer camps, and we kept making more and more money, and we just turned it around. We flipped it, and nothing bad happened in that park on our watch. Wildlife were safe. No longer were animals being killed. Anyhow, the point of the story is I left. I went to another park. They moved me to a different park. They wanted me to do the same thing at a farm park, at a historic site, and they changed the performance metrics on the park that I left. Within 12 years of work, it was the gem of the community. And it just only took a year or two for it to fall in disrepair, and some of those same activities creep back in, and the paint to peel, and the weeds to grow, and the people to not feeling safe with their kids on the playground there. And so I think the biggest threat to no-kill for us, same thing as a park or anywhere else, is not having really clear performance metrics that everybody knows about. And I really do believe in making them visual. We did this in Austin, right, Mike? Those things were in the bathroom. If you were sitting down to make number 2, they were on the wall in front of you. And they were in the hallways. And it was our workplace culture agreement and our performance metric. And then we kept always talking about it. So my colleagues here pointed out some amazing things, particularly the piece about negativity. But I also think have your mission, vision, goals, what you're committed to, where everybody can see them. So on those dark days when people feel lost, they can see them.
Awesome. When shelters are moving towards increasing life saving, staff can perceive that this means more work and can become resistant to no-kill culture. Has this happened to you, and how did you deal with that?
Yes.
It does mean more work. I mean, be honest. I think one of our challenges is more trying to get people to not work. I'm looking out in the audience, and I want to point you out because I told you if you came that I would talk to you. But we have one staff person there. I think 2 of them actually. They're our placement directors, and it's their. They oversee the departments that get all the animals out. And they're both working right this second. Even though I'm speaking. Okay, you put your phone down for a minute because I'm looking at you. But it's really trying to get people to have some kind of balance because the work, I mean, you mentioned already that there's urgency, there's crisis, and we thrive on that. But people do it 24/7, and not everybody can keep up, so that causes a little bit of an issue. So it is trying to find ways to balance that because it is more work. It just flat out is. It is. It's more work. It's more resources. You can build a bigger shelter, and they're going to fill it. You can have more money, and you're going to spend it. The animals will take up every available resource that they can. And I think that's just part of it. So.
It is a lot of work. Yeah, when I first started, we changed all the cleaning protocols, moved animals, and we created new space for animals, and so I lost a lot of staff because it was too much for them. And I was actually glad of that. I was glad that some of the staff members decided to leave because it's a different skill set in some ways. I had a front desk staff member that hated people. I was afraid of her. I tell this story a billion times at these conferences. I literally was afraid of this woman. I was afraid she'd like cut me in the parking lot one day. But again, I moved her off the front desk pretty quickly, just so you know. And then she did eventually leave. But it's a different set of tools and different mindset that sometimes is difficult for people. And I agree, it is a 24/7 job, especially when you're trying to reach that benchmark. And then having to maintain it has a different set of problems with it. And that's why it's important to really get people on your side that are positive. And I think that Tawny said it, or maybe it was Rebecca, celebrate the successes. I mean, that's how you keep them moving along, is every time that really hard to adopt animal gets adopted, or that rescue organization comes in and takes 20 dogs from you in one day, you really have to help everybody focus on what's positive about the work that they're doing. And do encourage self-care. I'm the worst at it, so I can't really talk too much about self-care. Because I'm awful at it.
You know, another thing that helps too, when I came to Austin, we were between 90 and 92 save rate. And we started saving more animals, and some of the staff were like, "Are you kidding?" We worked really hard to get here because it was, tough road. They weren't given additional resources right away. It was just a mandate with no resources. And the resources came over time. And then we started saving more lives, and some people kind of felt like maybe, they never said, "Did you move the finish line?" But that's kind of like, what is it? And I'm like, well, it's not a number. Like, we don't get to 90 and then go ahead and start killing pets for space. And that was happening. That was happening in the largest no-kill city in the nation, that they got to 90, they busted their butts to get to 90 and to save as many lives as possible, but they took it as far as they could. And so that negativity and the resistance, the way I dealt with it is I knew the staff never wanted pets to die. And so by discussing the euthanasia list and not just having one person look at it, because once the pet's behind the closed door, they're behind the closed door, whoever's administering the Fatal Plus is the one that's having to deal with it. But if they were looking at the youth list with me and we had roundtable meetings, Mike knows about the process. It's messy because everybody has an opinion and people are crying and not talking to each other. But in the end, we were a stronger team. So I think keeping people in touch with what the more work is about, the plastic bags and the incinerator, and they're not removed from the more work. What the good part of the more work is avoiding pets leaving in bags. So we just have to keep remembering that, because otherwise, fatigue. You forget what you're fighting for.
No, you're good.
I mean, I think these guys said it the best. I think the only thing that I would add is, as Rebecca said, it plain and simply is harder. But the end goal and the long game is to, as Tawny just said, reduce the type of work that you're doing, which is, it'll change you, the amount of euthanasia or killing that you've done if you're in a shelter. So that hard work does pay off in a different way. And I think about, I came from a traditional shelter as a kennel attendant. And the one thing that I would tell you guys too is I've walked into, whether it was Reno, Philly, LA, and even when I see shelters, when I would start to change things, I would constantly hear from somebody in kennels or animal care, whatever you call it, "Man, we just cleaned this kennel, now we're gonna put another animal in it." And I know a lot of people would they wanna boil over. And what I think about is, after leaving my first traditional shelter and going to work in Reno, one of the things that I did, because I didn't know any better, was I presented my CEO with a list of animals, because the only way that I knew how to judge behavior and effectively grade animals was Safer at that time. This is 2006. She could have destroyed me. Because it was, it's a 10-minute test, and you guys all know this, a 10-minute test to determine whether an animal is savable or not is kind of silly, but she was very kind to me, and it was a really good learning moment for me. And I think about that when I hear that from staff, because a lot of times I think it's the same thing and they're not quite gauging the bigger picture. Now, to McKenna's point, is if you've had that time and you've taken that time with some of these guys and then it's Groundhog Day, that's when there might be a problem.
Thank you. I think, McKenna, we're all wondering, did that front desk person ever cut you?
She never cut me.
Good. Glad to
She
hear
did go
it.
to work for another vet office, and I refused to go into that vet. I mean, I'm serious.
So you're still scared of her?
I actually am. I have to be honest with you. And I'm pretty tight. But no.
All right, so we know that we've been talking about, no-kill culture within a shelter an organization. How about getting that out beyond just your walls and out into the community? What are you guys doing to do that?
What are you doing, Tawny, to do that?
Well, when I was, the turning point in Fairfax was, bringing the community in, because it's really hard for the elected officials to fight something that the community really wants and their constituents want. And that's why I said in one of the other talks, I said, always give credit to the elected and appointed officials, whether they lifted a finger or not. They may have just, by not stopping you, did you a favor. They may have helped get you funding that you don't know about. And let's just face it, it's just psychology. If you thank them publicly for all of their leadership in making life-saving possible, then it becomes part of their political platform or it becomes part of their resume. And who cares who gets the credit? You just want to keep the funding going, right? And keep the support going, and you don't want to be stopped. So I think when you bring the community in, you automatically are making it political. And you're also, because no-kill is not the municipality's responsibility alone or the nonprofit's responsibility alone. It's the mayors, it's city council, it's county commissioners, it's the city and county manager, it's the business community, it's the voters, it's a community ethic. And so that's why foster programs save lives in multiple ways. And volunteer programs are so important in multiple ways, not just folding laundry and walking dogs. It's also when they're at church, temple, synagogue, PTA, talking about the animal shelter. It becomes more grassroots and organic. There was something I was going to say, though, about making it an ethic. I lost it. It was something we did. I know what it was. In Austin, my first day on the job, a 20-year drought broke, and there was record flooding. It was June, and we had pets in the crate, and somebody called the state vet on us and said that we had them living in crates. Well, they'd been in a crate for like 12 hours. So, or the fire marshal, they called somebody. I figured who it was. Anyhow, we called the TV stations. They all came out. We gave an interview. We said no kill's a community ethic. Austin loves their pets. When I left for work that night at like 8 o'clock, left for home, every single pet had gone home with a foster. So.
Good job.
Yeah, I mean, besides transparency, the thing that I think about too, to Tawny's point, is when something really is happening that you can potentially get killed for, and what I think about is in 2010, 2011, I was working for Sue Cosby Jennings, who's with the Petco Foundation now, and we were in Pennsylvania, and we had the strep zoo outbreak. And I had never heard of strep zoo up until that point. And, like a lot of you guys, if you work in shelters, we were getting killed a lot because we oversaw animal control as well. And it was tough. The numbers were tough, and we were taking over an organization that was kind of about to go out of business. So it was a lot. And I remember her thought and us coming together in the back room and inviting people in to kind of educate them on strep zoo, because what we were afraid of is, one, nobody would want to come and actually save the animals because we barely understood it. So once we kind of got our heads wrapped around what it was, what we were going to do, and the fact that we were not going to depopulate, which even in 2011 was usually the common thing to do, especially with something like strep zoo. And if you're not familiar with it, it's pretty easy to treat, but it's tremendously quick in killing animals, and it doesn't look good. And it comes from horses, and we did cruelty work at one of our facilities. So, and oddly enough, and I think this is in Atlanta, there are so many damn horses in row homes in Philadelphia, it's ridiculous. So we dealt with horses all the time in places that horses shouldn't be there. And this is kind of where the disease came from. So when we wanted to depopulate, we were getting a lot of pushback. So we wanted to invite the community. We did the same thing that Connie kind of just described with the crate situation, and laid out kind of the things that we deal with as a shelter, and really put the as the kids say, put the community on blast, to really be like, this is kind of a bigger issue. And it really kind of started propelling our support much more in the community in Philadelphia once we started being a lot more transparent, even when you had a scary situation like a disease outbreak.
I love the media, and I love attention from the media. So I did everything I could to make sure everybody knew what our plan was for the shelter and for Lynchburg and the community. And I wrote press release after press release after press release on any little thing we did right, and really tried to make sure the community understood that they were part of the solution and that we needed their help. Very much like they were saying, open transparency on the problems we were facing. We didn't hide anything. And I wrote editorials for the paper. I did everything I could to make sure people knew what we were trying to do. And that culture shift with the public was easy. When you explain to them, we're doing all these programs so that we don't have to euthanize animals that are healthy and treatable for space purposes, and we need more funding to help medically treat some of these animals that we couldn't before. And they step up. The community steps up quickly. Where we struggled and what was tearing us down, and I'm going to hope that I'm not alone here, and probably not, is the other rescue organizations and the other shelters around us. They were trying to keep us in some ways by speaking out, us moving forward. So that cultural shift was more difficult than the actual public, but they did culture shift with us, some of them. One or two didn't, but that's okay. And now 2 of the organizations around us who were very anti-no-kill are considering themselves no-kill. So it's an interesting shift. If you just succeed and you just keep moving in the direction that you know is right, they all come with you pretty quickly, except for the rescues, maybe not as quick, but they came.
I don't know if we all have to address something on this particular topic. I think it could be like a day-long workshops, because there are just so many elements to bringing no-kill to your community. And and for us, some stumbling blocks to I don't want to call it a lack of transparency. We achieved a 90% save rate, I think around, I want to say it was towards the end of 2016 in one shelter. And so we were kind of cruising along at 90% for about 5 or 6 months and declared victory. And then we weren't 90% anymore. And so that has, I think, caused our marketing department all kinds of fits on how to communicate the message and how to let people know we're working towards no-kill, and we were there, but we're not really there right now. And we're always working with that message. Obviously one of the things that we did was invest in marketing, and we have social media coordinators in each one of our facilities. We have a pretty robust marketing department. We have, Lifeline has a number of locations. We work with 2 different governments, 2 different large county shelter populations. And so there are a lot of moving parts, but we have kind of an overall marketing effort that we try to speak with one voice from every location, even though we're not the only game in town. So and that's another issue. When people think about animals in the Atlanta area, they think about the Atlanta Humane Society, just because it's been there for 150 years, and our message is not their message, and vice versa. So there are a lot of things to overcome. I think the thing that you really have to focus on from a leadership position is your county officials and how you're able to interface with them. What was most effective for us in one county was to have an advisory board comprised of people who really had some political connections. And we were facing in one of our counties a lot of adversity from county employees, not leadership, but from the county employees. And I very quietly asked best friends to come in without even my fingerprints on it. Now they're all over it because I'm saying it publicly, but to come in and, I know, what happens in Austin stays in Austin. But to come in and introduce a no-kill resolution. And I knew that we had sufficient political support to get the no-kill resolution passed. And a few people called me and are like, do you want this? You really want a no-kill resolution? And the reason I wanted it is the contract was going to come up for bid. And I was afraid that the county was going to put things into the contract that were just flat out anti-no-kill. Whether it was restricting it was restricting adoptions, it was restricting animals that could go to rescue groups, and we just had a sense that this was happening. So you have to include everybody. You have to include everybody.
Oh, thank you. So
we got a new contract, and it doesn't have any of that stuff in
Woohoo.
it, and it's twice as much money, and so it's all good.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks.
Nice. All right, wrap-up question. What are the, 3 key characteristics of a no-kill culture?
Perseverance, just total faith that you're going to get this done, and the strong belief that every single life matters, everyone, even yours.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree, yes, all of those. Fearless, dealing with your own fears and working through them. I think that's in not being afraid to try new things. Change, I think that's a word that I would use a lot in our organization. And assuming the best of people and situations and coming at people with a yes attitude and not focusing on the negatives. More of a yes environment.
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier already, and just to reiterate, I think one is positivity and celebration, and that really kind of brings people to you, whether it's through how you communicate marketing or even just how your place kind of functions with each other. It does exude a place of warmth. I agree, in accepting or being comfortable with change is definitely one of those things. And I had a third one, and I don't remember what it was, but I said it earlier, so we'll check the tape. Urgency. Thank you, Rebecca. And urgency.
I think I would say, those are great, but to build on that, I would say intellectual curiosity. I used to say in Fairfax that there was death and certainty. Everybody was always so damn sure they were making the right decision. And I never felt sure I was making the right decision when I was signing any paperwork that involved a death. Unless, of course, I have a pet. We're not trying to end euthanasia. That's not what we're trying to end. So intellectual curiosity and having that learner's mind. The other one, I think, is clarity. So you don't get confused. Remember I talked about putting the goals on the wall? Really having mission clarity and like a devotion to that. And I think the third one would be entrepreneurial thinking. It's kind of a cousin to intellectual curiosity, but we have to be MacGyvers in this field, and not just in fixing things and keeping things going, but even political MacGyvers. Sometimes backdoor approaches to trying to reach somebody so they'll support you on something that's going to be life or death. And if you're not a director at a really high level and you're not really dealing in the political arena, but you are, because you're supporting someone who is, and out in the community and with the staff you are. Because what did Tip O'Neill say? All politics is local. And he said, and I said, it should be R, but no, it's is. And so politics and that kind of stuff exists at all different levels.
Cool, thank you. What questions do you guys have? At the very back. Here, let me.
We'll repeat your question in here. Oh, you got it? Okay.
While she's getting the mic, I want to share one of our core values with you. It's one of our core values, besides the basic ones, which are transparency and be kind and all of those, it's glitter. Yeah, glitter. So the reason we chose glitter is because it sparkles, it delights, it makes people happy, and it sticks around way longer than intended, and it makes an impact. So think of some creative other ways of, making your staff excited about what you're doing. And so glitter is our go-to phrase, typically.
Okay, so my question is, when you are walking into a traditional culture and you have new staff members who have been doing things the old way, so to speak, for decades at a time, what are ways that you can approach introducing them to the no-kill culture and leading them down a path of success without making them feel criticized? I mean, ACO officers, they may be burnout, they may be dealing with compassion fatigue, they may feel like the community already criticizes them more than what they deserve as they feel. So how does a new leadership figure deal with that in mind and also try to achieve no-kill goals and create a better culture at the same time?
So one of the 12 ingredients that Dr. Jefferson talks about, one of them is culture agreement. And in a way, that's what I did. So what you just described was my landing in Philadelphia. And, they had kennels that we did humane law enforcement, and we did animal control, and we didn't have any kennels that were over 4 feet because until a year before that, they euthanized and killed every pit bull that came in, just irregardless. So it was a huge shift for them when I came in and Sue Cosby came in from the crazy no-kill side of things. We had a staff meeting. We described and really tried to be very poignant about what the direction was going to be, what we were going to do, and did a culture agreement. We did have them sign up, went over core values, went over what our goals were going to be for that year, what the long-term goals were going to be. We knew that we could turn pretty much every shelter with the exception, we had 7 shelters. And the only one that we knew was going to take a step-by-step approach was going to be the animal control shelter. But every other shelter, we literally, within a day, were able to say, we're stopping killing right now. And we're going to, we are going to functionally focus on life-saving. So we did the culture agreement. I would do huddle-ups with certain staff members. I would also start to pick out people that I knew were allies in the management team and really started doing a lot of one-on-ones with them. And we're going to do a panel on accountability in 2 times from now, but I held everybody accountable, and that was really tough at first, and we lost some people. But I was kind in doing so, but people had to get on the bus, as I said, because the more time that I spent in trying to massage everybody's feelings or getting them close to change, we were losing lives. But at the same time, I didn't want to take such a huge culture shift, so I just tried to find the balance. But it was relatively quickly. I explained what we were doing, why we were doing it, and then said, guys, either this is the place for you, and if it's not the place for you, that's cool. You guys should probably resign, though, because this is what we're going to be doing.
I just want to add something to that. We do have folks that work for Lifeline that have been in the industry, and it is an industry for a really long time. And we all inherited this. Kristen talked about the broken foundation. And we have coworkers that really worked in a system that it was just horrific and awful and hidden. And I have coworkers that, worked in the shelter that we have now, where animals were housed by day of the week. And so the animals that came in on Monday were killed on Wednesday, and they now work in that same shelter, and we're trying to save every animal in there. And they've made that transition, but it has always been important to me to really honor their work. And even though the foundation was broken and some of the leadership was broken, the people on the front lines aren't, or don't have to be. And so I do try to I thank them for hanging in there all these years, because it's been hard to get here for a lot of those folks. So
You might do a SWOT analysis. You might do a SWOT analysis also, or something like that. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but just query them and let them have an opportunity to talk about what they like and don't like. And I'm thinking about Fairfax and Austin, and just just people having a voice, that they can voice how they thought things went and things that were going well. And it's not bad when people leave an organization if it doesn't fit their beliefs or their values anymore. And I remember I said that at a meeting in Austin, and I was later asked to apologize to some of the staff because I'd hurt their feelings. And so I met with them, and they were mostly vet techs in the medical department. And I asked them to come in the office, and they asked them what I said that hurt their feelings. And they said, "Why did you assume that we weren't on board with no kill? Why did you say, if this is not a good fit for you, I'll support you if you want to leave, give you a transfer to another department like parks or health department or libraries or police fire. We've been waiting." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it to come out like that." But I'm glad I had that conversation. I'm glad they felt comfortable saying, "You hurt my feelings," when you made an assumption that maybe not everybody's on board.
What advice would you guys provide to people who are in a shelter where the leadership is more traditional, and that there's not a lot of education about no-kill within the shelter, but you're not in a leadership position yet?
That's a tough one.
I mean, that was me to begin with, and I ultimately knew at the time that I was there. I was a kennel manager, so I went from a kennel technician to an officer and did adoptions. But I knew in the immediate future that my leadership was not bought into no kill, and that's when I started really discovering no kill. I left, and I took a job that fit my what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do the work, and that was a really tough decision. I think that somebody, I wish Jose was here to talk, because he stayed in an organization for years, that it took years for them to transition, one of our colleagues. So I wish I could speak from that aspect. From a personal aspect, I ultimately made a decision to leave. And ultimately that shelter did start to do some of that stuff, but I would have been in an environment that I felt like I was at a glass ceiling, and would have been solely killing animals myself by the dozens every day for another probably 4 or 5 years, and I just wasn't willing to do that anymore.
I don't have personal experience myself, but I have heard others in similar situations. They'll go to their leadership with ideas and ask if it can be tried. Can we try it, and just give me 2 months to try this new program, and we can track it and see if it's successful or if it's not, or they would bring articles to them to say, if you're not in favor of community cat programs, well, so here's some statistics and here's some facts, and try and educate a little bit, but doing it in a professional, obviously, you don't want to lose your job unless you want to lose your job, type of way. But I love the try it and track it type of mentality, because it helps people to get past their fear of why they don't want to try certain things. And I guarantee you it is a fear.
Yeah, pilot programs are great. That what McKenna was saying, I really recommend those. I worked for a police chief, directly for a chief, who I knew I couldn't use no-kill language in Fairfax. That just wasn't going to fly. And so I never did. And we just did it, but we didn't call it that. And we kept celebrating the life-saving, and I just kept, piloting it, and then measuring it and saying, "This is successful, boss. We've got to keep doing more of it." It's a little different, though, because he wasn't in animal welfare, and he trusted me to be doing the right things. If you're referring to where, like, you are working together in the system, and the boss isn't supervisor, whatever level's not supportive, I would definitely go for pilot programs, and I would say, this is why I think this is going to be good for us. We're going to save some money. We're going to get new friends. We're going to get new volunteers. We're going to get, save money, or maybe make money, or save more lives and have more bench strength so we can do more fundraising, or whatever the goal is that matters to the boss that doesn't want to be no kill. I would attach life-saving programs to something that matters to them and stop talking about no-kill if that's the deal breaker. What do you care what you call it? Just do it, right? That's the way I was. And then in Austin, everybody was very comfortable with that language. But I don't use, when I'm out, well, I was doing regional work, and when I was meeting with elected officials and commissioners and city managers, I didn't come out of the box with no-kill. I talked about performance metrics and life-saving.
And I'll just add, apply for a Maddie's Fund Innovation Grant to do that pilot project.
And yes, and I did. They funded it. That's why I was on the stage holding up my number today.
I think just knowing their why, like why can't, what is their thought process? What is the why to not allowing certain programs, or I think that helps to kind of break down that barrier.
Yeah, and I think more and more it's becoming, with my story, it's becoming more unacceptable for, like my boss would literally say, because that's the way it is. Like there was no reason. That doesn't seem to be, even in we work in a lot of shelters these days. Just culture in shelters, even more traditional shelters, are starting to change where that's not even an acceptable response to your staff anymore.
How do you avoid things becoming cliquey within the staff when there may be dissension on, maybe there's not buy-in in some areas and then there is buy-in in other areas when you're moving towards no-kill or getting that
or
level?
anything.
Right,
When
sure.
you're doing anything.
When you're doing anything.
Cliques are everywhere.
Really good question, guys. Go ahead.
Come on, McKenna.
I got.
Guys got this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me mirror back to you what I think I heard you say, 'cause I'm not 100% sure. So, are you asking how you deal with cliquiness among staff members or cliquiness among groups within the shelter? For instance, adoption staff is cliquey against the animal care staff, and my favorite is the clinic staff is always the outsider to everything.
Right.
Right?
I think I'm, the shelter that I previously came from, there was a lot of, group mentality, like your in-tribe versus your out-tribe type of deal, when it was a lot of the vet services versus, I was in behavior, so nothing I did was of any consequence to the vet staff. So, but some of the other presentations that I've been to, there was a lot of talk about like peers supporting each other, like support each other through this. If you can't talk to your supervisor, you don't want to, show how stressed you are about a certain situation, talk to a peer. And I guess just the idea around that becoming like, well, we're not going to do it this way, we're going to band together, in our own mentality versus, when people are trying to move you forward, whether that's leadership or management or whatever. So,
I worked, when I first started in Lynchburg, there was a lot of cliquiness. There was one group against the other group. And when we moved into the big building, we went from like 6,000 square foot to 25,000 square foot. We found more of it because people were more spread out. They weren't on top of each other as much, and so the relationship part of it kind of diminished, is what the word I wanted to use. So you were less likely to interact with the clinic staff if you were on the adoption staff. And so we worked really hard to cut the clickiness and tried to find ways of cross-pollinating some of the job responsibilities, so they were interacting far more. So our intake staff was also working with the medical staff in regards to fosters. And so we tried to find ways to work together. And the other thing I would say is when you have cliques happening in a shelter, look to the leadership, because I think there's a leadership issue as well. I think that in Lynchburg, it was not tolerated. And if two staff members had a problem and then this group of friends started going against this group of friends, it was not tolerated. We sat them down. We communicated what we needed from them and the type of relationships we were going to have, and if they weren't a part of it, then they both need to leave. And so it was squashed pretty quickly.
I think everything McKenna said, I echo. I think too, workplace culture agreements are really helpful, and that's why we had it like blown up in the in the bathrooms, in the hallways, in the lunchroom, and you just do coaching, counseling. But if the leader's part of it, and I have worked in a couple of communities where the leader definitely was part of, it's usually, not always, in my experience, divided into two camps. One, we want to keep saving as many as we can, and the other is, are you friggin' kidding me? We're doing the best we can. Not that they're pro-death. It's just like, this is nuts. You've pushed it too far. Those are the two camps almost always. What?
Nothing. I was just giving her the time frame.
4
Oh.
minutes.
Yeah, 4 minutes.
Glitter.
Glitter.
And I would say if you're somebody that is not a leadership person and you want to try to send UC clicks, the thing, you know, I know it feels powerless sometimes, but what you can do is go out of your way to interact with other areas, and that's potentially something that can start a counterculture of how you guys operate as well. It's very true. It's usually a reflection of management, but there are things that you can do if you are the person that wants to try to do something proactive on your own.
And as a young supervisor, if any of you are out there, don't talk to other staff members about other staff members. That is one of the ways to develop that division within your own team as well.
And lead by example. It might feel good, like scratching an itch, but you'll regret it afterwards. And we're all guilty of it. And every day we make a decision to be a better version of ourselves. Nobody's perfect, but resist the urge to succumb to being part of it. Particularly if you've been promoted up through the ranks and you still have friends on different teams, confidants.
And that's really true. I mean, you know, don't be a part of it if you can at all avoid it. But it's something that we're kind of plagued with, and I'm searching for solutions, and I find myself falling into all the behaviors we're all telling you not to do. And I talked to someone about it, and this actually came out of my mouth that I wanted to be a good role model, but I'm badly behaved. And so, you know, it is at first, just about everything in this field first is an inside job. After that, it's a tough one. And I think that's something that our organization is going to have to face more directly, because we've let it go on for too long. And it can be damaging, and you can lose really good people. You can also lose some people that you need to lose. And sometimes that's hard as well, because they may bring value to the organization, but sometimes you just have to rip off that Band-Aid. So it's always a work in progress.
Maybe we have one last question.
I'll try and make it brief. Tawny really triggered something in me. I report to a chief of police right now who does not want to kill animals, but does not want to hear no kill. In Corpus Christi, South Texas, I have a mayor who is making sure my council member isn't in here, because he did come up with me. So I'm grateful I have the support of a number of city council members. But we have a mayor who is a South Texas good old boy, and animals are property. So it's inevitable. My chief knows when he hired me, he knew better. He knew where I was going to head. I came here from Austin. But any pearls of wisdom on how I move ahead, I mean, I'm in a tightrope right now. I've got a majority of the city council behind me. I've got a chief of police who I say, I want to stop killing animals, but I can't call it no kill.
Yeah, don't call it, Mike, I would do exactly what I did in Fairfax. Just don't ever call it no kill, and just keep celebrating it and saying, let's see, this is old, this is when I was in Fairfax. We figured out by not killing animals for space, we were in the top 1% of performing shelters. Now there's new data and statistics out, but they love, police chiefs and municipal leaders love data and statistics. They love being firsts. They love being part of an elite group. They love being able to hang their hat on saying, we're like in the top 5% or 10% of shelters in the United States. Oh, really? Well, how so? Well, we have a great live release rate. We're connected to the community. We make sure lost pets get home. We don't just try and punish people, just like the police. Police, think about neighborhood watch and community policing. Police have learned that if they work with the community, they're going to get a little further than if it's always punishment. Good police departments know that, and they know that. And I would connect to that culture of involvement in the community, because it's like crime prevention. It's not the same thing, but to them, if they can prevent crime, it's less work, less hassle, less paperwork, less issues. If you can prevent animal issues by partnering with the community and being a resource center, it's going to be less work.
Yeah, Mike, I would focus on the ingredients, and if it's obviously going to be a blockade for you, so don't worry about the no-kill terminology. You know, save 90. You can reframe it. That's something that he's going to be more comfortable, or she's going to be more comfortable with. And I would use that right now not to be a big blockade for you.
All right, we are out of time. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists.